All right, let's discuss. We're joined now by the head of African Futures and Innovation at the Institute of Security Studies, Jakkie Cilliers. Mr. Cilliers, great to have you with us. Let's just look at this post-peace mission rhetoric. President Ramaphosa saying he's found the talks impactful. There was a warm reception. But looking at the 10 points he raised on behalf of African leaders, number 10 is talks. And it seems like a non-starter if Ukraine is saying, well, we want Russia to withdraw. Russia is saying no. I mean, what do you think about the potential impact this could have in future?
Good afternoon, Francis. Well, I think this is quite an important initiative for two other reasons. The first is that it probably draws the spirit. It could probably allow the BRICS summit to carry on, as well as the Africa-Russia summit. Those two initiatives, which are perhaps tangential to the meeting that happened in St. Petersburg and Kiev, would, if they are successful, would mean that President Ramaphosa has succeeded in, in positioning Africa in relation to a very challenging position where Africa, and South Africa in particular, finds itself caught between the sanctions of the West and the pressure from the West, and in particular South Africa's the perception that South Africa is partial to Russia. So from that perspective, I think quite a successful mission. On the broader issue that you raise, the extent to which this will be the start of the end of the conflict, it is early days. And one can argue that this may give Putin a breather if the African position was accepted, in the sense that it would forestall or halt the Ukrainian counteroffensive, which is now gaining momentum. But I don't think that that's going to happen. I think generally analysts would probably agree that the two parties haven't yet, Russia and Ukraine, haven't yet reached sort of a mutually hurting stalemate, is often the term that is used, and that considerable, unfortunately, blood is going to be spilt before there is a real negotiations.
All right, so you raised something interesting. There was speculation that maybe even one of the main reasons for our president to go was for that bilateral meeting with Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, to talk about BRICS. So you believe behind closed doors he would have been trying to get an agreement about how we can hold the BRICS, or how it can be moved so we don't have to arrest Putin?
Yes, this is a game of cat and mouse. My understanding is that the one-on-one bilateral meeting did not happen, so President Ramaphosa did not have the opportunity to raise this with President Putin. I don't know, I'm not there. But certainly what South Africa is trying to do is to position itself to get out of the corner that it painted itself into, with the fact that it may be it has invited Putin to South Africa, because one of the apparently one of the preconditions or confidence building measures that South Africa has put on the table, that the African delegation has put on the table, is of course the withdrawal of the ICC indictment, arrest warrant on Putin, and that would open the way for the BRICS summit to happen, for the Russia-Africa summit to happen. But irrespective of that, South Africa and Africa can now argue that, in a sense, there's a peace process going on, and that Western interference in Putin coming to South Africa would really be counterproductive. So from that perspective, probably quite successful.
All right, that's interesting. If you look at the points that Ramaphosa read out on behalf of the African leaders, releasing prisoners of war, the war must end through negotiation, what really stood out to me, and it was in that clip that we had, the president speaking about African leaders accepting the sovereignty of states according to the UN Charter. Is that another way of, a roundabout way of saying that Russia invaded a sovereign state, breaking international law, something that South Africa hasn't always stated bluntly?
The reality is very clear. You have Russia invaded Ukraine against the Charter of the UN. It attacks and and targets civilians, and it threatens the use of nuclear weapons. Those 3 points are literally non-negotiable in terms of moving forward, in terms of international law. You heard Lavrov try and balance this issue that you have to look at sovereignty in all its complexities and all its dimensions, because, of course, that's something that Russia finds very difficult to counter, because it is a signatory to the UN Convention, and it is very blatantly undermined and gone against the basic tenets of international law. So you find a game of cat and mouse ahead of, as I said, the BRICS summit, and ahead of the Africa-Russia summit later this year. And of course, South Africa has much to lose. AGOA and all kinds of pressure on South Africa. And one can also make the point that it is only because of South Africa's pro-Russian position that we were able to lead and undertake this position, and why Putin was prepared to listen to President Ramaphosa.
All right, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much. And also, we didn't even get to the logistics shambles that has been will be talked about in Parliament now. But we appreciate your take, Jakkie Cilliers, ISS Head of African Futures and Innovation.